everyone, and welcome to this series dedicated to exploring the intersection of artificial intelligence and user experience. I'm Andrea, your host, and we're here to dive into the latest in AI-enabled research tools. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started and turn the spotlight on today's presenter, Alok Jain. Alok has nearly 3 decades of experience in product research and has worked with renowned organizations such as Capital One, Centene, and the World Bank. In addition to extensive research background, he also has 6 years of experience in machine learning. Alok is driven by a passion for research and design, and he's committed to developing innovative technologies that empower researchers and enable us to deliver greater value. And with that, welcome, Alok. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. It's good to see some familiar faces in the audience as well.
Awesome. Well, why don't we just start things off with your elevator pitch? What can Reveal do for UX researchers?
So what Reveal does is it uses AI to streamline the parts that can help us focus more on our time. So specifically on the synthesis of qualitative research. And it's not just about automation and speed in that sense. What it does is it adds a more natural way of exploring qualitative data, which then allows us to go deeper in our research. So as we go through the demo, I'd love to show you how that is done.
Great, thank you. So just to clarify a few things that I heard, one, Reveal is part of the analysis process.
That's
And
correct.
once you've conducted your interviews, once you've conducted your studies, it's a place to explore the data and dig deep. And it facilitates doing that with AI in a way that is much more powerful and gives you a lot more tools than just doing it by hand.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Perfect. Awesome. And how does your product use AI to enhance UX research? Where is the AI in it?
Right. So it actually does it in a few different places. So the way it works is you're able to take your interview, whether it's a IDI or it's a focus group, you're able to add it over to Reveal. So the first thing it'll do is it'll transcribe, and then you're able to identify who the researcher is and who the participants are. And then based on that, the first thing Reveal uses AI for is to extract out conversations. What is it that people are really talking about? Once it has that understanding, then it can look at the research questions that you have, which you can specify, and starts to identify observations from those transcripts. It can then also compare those across different interviews and say, oh, here are the similarities, here are the differences, things like that. And then in the process, it is also looking at each interview, and it can suggest any kind of emerging themes that come out of it. So those are some baseline things. Then on top of it, we can do a lot more.
So what would you say is Reveal's superpower?
One is the speed at which it works. It allows you to think iteratively. So let's say you have a research question, you input into Reveal, you'll get a response back within a few seconds. And that enables you to say, oh, that's interesting. Let me dig deeper on that. Or what about this? And you're able to do that back and forth with Reveal. So I think that's a really interesting in my own experience, as well as the feedback that I've received from customers. That's been an area that people have found very useful.
Yeah.
The second part of it is around scale. If I have a study of 50 interviews, or if over a period of time I've done multiple studies and I have a large number of interviews, parsing through all that data is very difficult. AI makes it much simpler to do it. So being able to look at a larger sample of data and then gain insights, that's the other piece.
Great. Wonderful. Um, with that, why don't we jump in and you can show us how Reveal works?
Sure. Let me share my screen. There you go. So you should see a set of cards on the screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So this is how Reveal looks once you have logged in. What you're seeing is each of these sections are a study. So here there is a large study. In this case, we had done about 16 different focus groups equating to about 80 different participants. Here is one on multilingual. Here is one on employee benefits and so on. And then each of the cards represent an interview that has been conducted or a focus group that has been conducted. The way it starts is you would create a new study, give it a title, and you can enter some initial research questions here. These research questions can be very broad to say, I want to understand sentiments, emotions, needs, pain points, things like that. Or you can make them very specific to say, what did the interviewee say about a particular topic, things like that. And these are really just the starting points. Reveal will suggest other research questions that you might want to consider, and you can change them later in the study as well. Similarly, if you have any hypotheses, you can include those here, and Reveal will identify if there is evidence supporting that hypothesis, contradicting that hypothesis, or if there are mixed signals, and come back to you. Once you have done that, then you can add your interviews. To add the interviews, you can upload the file. So we support most of the common formats here. You can enter a Zoom URL. We are also working on Teams integration. And if you already have a transcript from another transcript service, or if you're using human transcription, you can bring it in here. With the uploading of the files, you also have an ability to ask Reveal to say, go and identify any sensitive information like a PII or PHI and redact it. So it can do that out of the box. It supports all of these languages. We have ability to extend it to even more languages. And a quick note about data privacy, obviously, with all the data that you're sharing, that's a fundamental point for Reveal. So your data is not getting used for any kind of AI model training. It is only being used to provide the service to you. And we're using in the background the services that are reliable like Amazon's and Microsoft's, and they would also not use your data for any other purpose. Once you have added the interview, then you can start to do the analysis. I'll go into this particular study, which was about employee benefits. And here we were looking to understand 401k benefit people. There are 14 different participants. So what you're seeing, each of the columns here represent a participant in that study. Each of the rows represent the research questions, which is what I had set up when I initially created this study. So question about awareness of 401k benefit, what is the current level of participation, reasons why people are not able to participate, things like that. And once the interviews have been uploaded, Reveal will ask you to identify who the participant is. And once you've done that, it'll run through this analysis. And for each of the cells, now it's showing you on the topic of awareness of benefit, what did the participant 14 think? Here is a summary. It's highlighting some keywords to make it easy to scan. Behind this summary, which is generated by AI, we are also tying it back to the individual transcript elements. So you can see the timeline. There are a lot of conversation that happened at this time in the conversation in the overall interview. In this case, it was a little more spread out. You can do mouse over and look at the actual utterance behind that. And if you wanted to look at the full transcript behind this, you can say see related transcript. A panel opens up on the right side, and you get a filtered view of everything that was being said that led AI to believe that this is the response to this particular research question.
Great. I have a question about this. So what if I disagree with
Yes.
some of the supporting evidence, or I want to say, I think they meant something different there. Can we rule that out? Is there a way to interact with and tune what
Yes,
the AI
absolutely.
is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is the researcher needs to be in control. AI is really intended to provide you an initial draft to help you move forward. So within this, you can click edit. And over here, now you have access to the full analysis that was presented. And if you disagreed with something, you can simply remove that. If you have any of your own comments, so you can say my own notes appear here, and those get added.
And so you're able to refine the summary based on your own exploration. But you're not going, you don't have to go in and tweak and say, like, take this piece of supporting data out. You're not down in the weeds with the supporting evidence. Is that right?
That is correct. That
Okay,
is correct.
great. How quickly can we expect it to process data files?
So a 2-hour interview typically takes about 20 seconds to get processed for transcription. And then once you've identified the participant, it typically takes maybe 10 to 15 seconds kinds to do the analysis for each of the research question. We had done a test with actually this very study with 14 different participants and 3 research questions. The whole grid that you're seeing got filled up in about 34 seconds.
Wonderful. That's really amazing how fast how responsive that is. Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. And that's where it becomes that interactive process. You see something, you want to ask a question, you can just go in and do and get the response in a few seconds. So the largest that I have tested is this one, the large study, which actually has 80 different participants. You can see it sort of runs pretty smoothly. So we still have to stretch the limit and see what if we went even larger, but at least for 80, I know there is evidence that it just works pretty
All right.
smoothly.
So 80, how small is too small?
There isn't, I mean, you could do it technically with just one interview if you wanted to. So there's no, and it could be like a 10-minute interview. It doesn't even have to be a 30-minute interview.
Okay. Go ahead and show us how that would work, how that exploration works.
Sure, absolutely. So let's say I'm looking at this and I'm curious, okay, how much do people really participate in their 401k? I can go ahead and do the edit the study. So I'm back to that screen that we initially had when we created the study. Ignore this for now, I'll come back to it. But here is where I can just add a new question to say, so I just added that research question. And now it's going to run the analysis for that research question. And here it is. So we can see the answers already popping in.
Wow. And so it's pulling in the data from each conversation, answering the new question in nearly real time.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Does it provide a summary answer to the question as a whole?
In this case, by default, it's giving you individual responses. We handle summary in a more detailed manner. So what happens is the first two columns over here that you will see are for similarities and contradictions. And that's going to look across all of these interviews, all the participants, and come back with a summarized view. So if I say run study level analysis, let's go ahead and do that. It's going to look at each of these interviews, compare for each of the research questions that I have, and then come back with this summary. And I'll be able to see, okay, what is the similarity across all of these interviews, or who were similar? Not everybody's going to have a similar response, but what were similarities, and similarly, what were the contradictions between them? So that starts to shape that summarized view.
I really love the contradictions section. I have to say that's not something I have seen as much of, and is something that, in my explorations and in my research is definitely something I like to stop and consider. It's like, where did we hear diverging opinions, and not, and how do we make sure to recognize that and represent that when we're presenting the data, so that it's not just everyone thinks this, but that there is more texture to it.
That's exactly right. And there are two kinds of summarization that I've seen in contradictions. One is where there is actual contradiction, where the two participants are saying opposite of each other, and it's able to identify that. But then also, if a participant says something, but nobody else has mentioned it as much, if there is sort of that long tail signal, things like those also show up in the contradictions.
Wonderful.
In addition to analyzing, Reveal then also is identifying what else are people talking about. And that's what you see here to say there are 138 additional topics found. If I click that, that was a section on the right side. And over here are all the other topics that Reveal has identified from those 14 different interviews that are being talked about.
Wow. So you can explore the topics that it has detected and pick which ones are relevant or interesting.
And if you like any, so like, let's say participation of the part-time employees, you just click, again, it gets added here. And just like before, once I update the study, it'll run through the analysis for that particular topic for all of the participants.
And remind me, how many respondents were in this study? Because it's pulling them in pretty quickly.
14 in this case.
14. Okay.
But I've tried this with larger studies. So the one that was there before with 80 participants, the feel of the experience is still going to be the same. It's coming up at a sub-second level for each respondent. So you're able to start reading and start to understand the response pretty quickly.
Great. And can you just remind us, show us again, because I think it's such a powerful connection, how this connects back to the supporting quotes for one of the answers.
Right. So if we go here, for instance, I can see the actual utterance right here. And if I click this, on the right side, I have this filtered view where I can see what was being.
Great. So it highlights not only in the timeline where the conversation brought up this topic, but then you can use the timeline to get to those points in the conversation and review the content.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Great.
And if you need to play the video or audio file, you can just play from that point onward. So you can interact with the media right here.
Nice. Nice. Okay. When it says download clip, what does that do?
Download clip will take the specific utterance here, so this part of the interview, and just download this part of the clip and download it as an audio or video file.
Okay, great. So if you
Yeah.
like, so it sort of auto chunks, if you will, the thoughts or the phrases. So you can pick you can take just a clip from your larger video this way.
That's exactly right. So if you need to include it in a report, you can do that. We are working on the ability where you'll be able to just select a piece of text and say, hey, I just want a video clip for this phrase.
Mhm.
That's not released yet, but that's something we are working on. So you'll be able to get even more granular with the
Okay.
download clips. So this is really just intended for a quick scan. The purpose of this timeline is twofold. One is to give you a little bit of a view into where in the conversation was this topic being discussed. So it just gives you a visual map of that, and then be able to quickly scan. But if you do want to dig deeper, then we would suggest that, yeah, just click that. You're going to get the same thing over here.
And is this the transcript in full transcript in order? So it's like you can see the content in context,
That's correct.
and then the timeline helps you jump to the part of the conversation that is relevant.
Yeah, it is filtering the transcript over here. So if I was to
Oh, it
just
is filtering it.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I didn't understand that before. Yes, so the natural part of the transcript looks like this, where you can see what the moderator said, what the respondent said. When you click this, it is filtering it down to the specific part of the transcript that is associated with this summary.
You mentioned Reveal will do the transcription if I feed it a video, if I feed it an audio file. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that process,
Mhm.
or what Reveal's capable of in the transcription phase?
Sure. So if I go here, once you upload the audio file or the Zoom recording, uh, we are essentially using a service in the background to do the transcription. That's where if there is redaction requested, then the redaction would be done at that service level itself. And what Reveal will receive is only the redacted output. So any kind of PII, PHI in the transcript would not hit our database or our servers, kind of a thing. So that's one part of it.
Okay.
The second part of it is once you have received that, you might want to tweak. It may not get it 100%, things like that. That's something that's not ready just yet, but it'll be very soon. So we are working on ability for you to be able to look at a transcript and then say, hey, redact this piece of information also, or this word wasn't really understood well, it should really be this. So you'll be able to specify those rules, and Reveal will essentially apply that to all the interviews that you upload for the study.
That's helpful. And then, of course, you can always get a corrected version of your transcript and then paste it back in.
That's right.
I see that as an option. Like you said, if you're doing human transcription or human refinement of
Yeah,
the transcription.
yeah, exactly.
Great.
And that's actually one of the central pieces of how Reveal is working, is that, for instance, if I go back to the participant 13 and I look at the transcript, uh, over here, it says since 2015, this is what the participant said. The context for this comment lives in what the moderator had said. So when Reveal is analyzing, before it starts to analyze, it actually extracts out these conversations. Uh, and if I go to conversation summary, so this happened at 31 seconds. If I go to conversation summary at 31 seconds, we can see this is what Reveal understood, that participant was talking about their 401k participation since 2015. So that's where that conversational element becomes very useful and central to Reveal.
That's amazing. And I love the conversation summaries, because you're right, the transcript is often not the level that we would want to do our analysis on. That's great. I love that you can flip between the transcriptions and the conversation summaries. Can I pull quotes into an insight? So can I start at the transcript level, identify quotes and say, I think these are all related, this is a theme, and then create a theme? Or is it always top down, where we say, what, this is the theme, tell me what supports this theme?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because underneath Reveal, essentially we're taking this qualitative data and we are trying to get meaning out of that. So that relationship exists in the background. We know we can surface it in that manner. We do not surface it today. But yes, that's exactly as we look at the future into the roadmap, how can we start to bring some of those relationships out more meaningfully? That's something we're working on. So short answer is yes, today you cannot do it, but underneath that, that capability exists, and we want to expose it. Cool. So one of the things that you were touching upon was around codes. So we do have a dedicated space for finding codes. If I go to my individual analysis, I can go to codes finder. And this is where then I will be able to specify any topic that I'm interested in finding the codes for. So over here, I have problems with participating in 401k as an example. And here are the specific verbatim codes that have been identified.
It says, quote, participant is hesitant about starting a 401k due to lack of information. But then if I navigate using the, if
Oh,
I'm just trying to make sure I understand how it works.
yeah,
Um,
you're right. It might have been with the test data. So no, it
oh,
is.
no, okay, so this is how this sounds more like what I was expecting, where it actually finds the quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, okay,
Yeah. So I think the previous ones were with the test data that I was working on. That's why it's showing that way. So
got it, okay, that
I need
makes
to
sense,
update my demo, but yeah, it'll come with the verbatim codes.
nice.
I'll just quickly show you hypothesis testing. It works very similar to what we saw before the observation. So initially we were in the observations space, and hypothesis testing works very similar. Here are different hypotheses that have been set up. And just like before, I'm getting a summary of what the AI found related to that hypothesis. But in addition, I also have an overall assessment from AI to say whether there is evidence supporting that hypothesis, whether there is evidence against it, or if it's sort of inconclusive. And like before, I can still go ahead and edit, and I can say, no, I disagree. This should actually be inconclusive. Add my notes. So you as a researcher would still have control over that.
But as at a first place to sort of say, explore similarities or explore to test specific hypotheses and say
Correct.
like this is true, you make a statement of truth, right? You think is this true or not about these participants, and then it will go through and for each participant tell you whether there's enough supporting evidence to say it's true or not or inconclusive.
That's correct. That's
Oh
exactly.
wow. One person is asking, what about hallucinations? Is this going to, like, how do I know it's all based in my data?
First of all, everything is tied back to the transcript. That's why you're able to get that view. Um, Actual usage, I've not seen hallucination happening. AI in general tries to be helpful. So if you ask AI something, it's very unlikely that it'll come back and say, "Hey, I don't know." So it's only on the edges, on the fringes. If I ask something that's completely unrelated to the interview, it will still try to answer that. But in your regular analysis, you will not see any hallucination. And in the background, the reason why how we are enabling that is part of it was that conversation extraction. So before we start to analyze it, we are actually making the effort to understand the conversations that are going on. And then the second is the way we request. In the background, we are using OpenAI. The way we use OpenAI in the back, there are some controls that we have to be able to say, "Hey, don't get creative. Give us answer that is more relevant." And we have played with that setting to get it to the right level.
Okay, so you've tuned the interaction with the AI agent in a way to be less creative or help and pull in external data and reference more the content here, the conversational content, and stay based in the data.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, great. I know somewhere, I think it was on the individual analysis, had that regenerate button. Often when you ask AI something more than once, you'll get a slightly different answer. So tell us a little bit about what the regenerate button does and how divergent the responses may be between regenerations.
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So regenerate function is actually completely regenerating. And so the question is, how divergent are the two going to be? That becomes a function of the research question. If I was to put a research question which is very broad to say sentiments, it can be interpreted in many different ways. And each time you do, you might find something very different from AI on that front. Everything would still be about emotions and sentiment, but it will still be different. If the research question starts to become very specific, how much do people actually contribute towards their 401k? And I can't remember if I'd done it in this study.
We
Uh,
added it, yeah.
how much is it? Yeah, exactly. So over here, it's talking about 3 to 5% limits, etc. So if I was to regenerate here, I would still get the same kind of data. It might be expressed in a slightly different language because it's getting generated again, but I would get same kind of data. So here it is regenerated, and we can see it's 3 to 5%. So it becomes a function of the research question, how broad or narrow that is.
What would be the benefit or the reason someone would use the regenerate function?
What I have seen is sometimes AI would just come back with one or two items over here, and it's not going deep enough in that regard. And you have a hypothesis, you have a view into, no, this should have something more in it.
Mhm.
That's the point where regenerate function works well.
Okay.
Outside of that, if it is not giving you as relevant a response, then it's better to tweak the language for the research question itself and ask it slightly differently. So I see that in three layers. One of this is, okay, when we say PII and PHI, what is the information that the transcription service is looking at? And we have a list of those. Those are going to be specific things like name, email, social security number, political affiliations, things like that. And I'm happy to provide a list of those uh, after the call also. So those are specific kinds of information that it is looking at. The second end of the spectrum is something like you were describing, that certain topics are more sensitive. They are not necessarily personally identifiable information, but we have to be aware of it. Uh, the tools like OpenAI, Anthropic, all the other large language models which are respectable, are looking at those kind of topics and building that into the large language models. So today, Reveal relies on them to take care of things that are more subjective in nature in that way. In between these two are things where you have clarity on some additional things that you want AI to be sensitive about. That's where that piece of functionality comes in, where you'll be able to specify, hey, I care about these particular words more carefully. So when you specify that, we'll be able to send it over to the transcription service and say, hey, take these into account as you're doing the transcription. So I think as a combination of these three, we'll be able to get it quite far. There is still an element of triangulation that happens where an individual piece of information itself might not be sensitive, but put it next to five other pieces and it becomes sensitive. And those kind of things right now, I don't think the technology is there yet. That will still require human judgment.
Tell us a little bit more about like GDPR or other regional privacy considerations and how this product supports or it doesn't yet support that.
So security has been an extremely important part right from the beginning for us. So we have a set of security policies, and we are actually setting up a place where you'll be able to go and review the policies in details and look at the audit against them and things like that. So when it comes to things like GDPR, we are not GDPR compliant, primarily because GDPR requires a registered agent in EU, which we don't have. But in terms of the policies that are required by GDPR to be compliant, whether it's access restrictions, encryption of data, things like that. All of those things are a part of our policy framework.
Okay. So as long as you have the consent or the permission of the respondents to store the interviews outside of the EU, on servers outside of the EU, then this meets the criteria for data handling, but it doesn't meet the criteria for data storage.
That's so we actually do have a EU specific server. If that is an important element to you, that the data for EU should be stored in EU, we do have. If you were to go to eu.doreveal.com,
Okay.
uh, you'll be able to basically register, and all of that data will only live in the EU servers. So
Okay,
that
so there may be some way, it's not officially GDPR compliant, but you could explore, someone, if that was important, could explore what
yes,
specific elements were important for them and maybe work with you in understanding what's possible.
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about the other ways that your product is keeping the user data safe and secure.
It boils down to these kind of practices. One is that your data fundamentally is only being used for the purposes of providing this service to you. Now, in the process, we still have to work with other players, whether it's OpenAI, whether it's a transcription service I mentioned, players like that. So when we select those services and when we contract with those services, we do ensure that they are also not using that data. So things like signing a BA with them, we have that kind of a thing. In terms of working with you, we are happy to sign an NDA as well. So we've done that with some of our customers. So that way, we are also equally responsible on a contractual basis to protect the data. Within the technology framework itself, the data is getting encrypted and the access is restricted only to the people within your team, or if you give us a permission, then our team can go in and obviously for troubleshooting purposes access it. So access is restricted. So data is only used for your purposes. It's only accessible by people you allow to have access, and then the same kind of rules are being applied to all the sub processes.
Let's go back and just see, are there other features or other things that you wanted to show us in particular?
One is you will see that there is ability to tag interviews. So here, if I go in and click update tags, I come here and I can just create any number of tags that I want here. To say new user, things like that. Once I have tagged the interviews, then I'm able to compare the tags also. So I can say, let's say, let me compare people who are tagged with one versus the other. So if I go into comparison reports here, and I can say new comparison report, and I can say I want to compare women versus men, or maybe a third dimension also, things like that. And with that, I can just create the report.
Wow.
So it's going to do the same thing. It's going to summarize what the women said. So in this case, all of these participants, what the men said, and then compare between them to say what are the similarities and differences across all of your research questions.
I love that. So it's a way to do segmented analysis.
Correct.
Is there any way that Reveal suggests those tags or suggests those segments, or is it up to the researcher to say what matters?
Right now, it is up to the researcher that
Okay,
on what matters. Yes.
great.
Cool. So you'll see there is a search link over here. So now I'm on the home page. I have my studies, and I'm able to now search across multiple studies. I click this. I can have natural language queries over here, and I can select the studies that I'm interested in searching. So I'll just go into a recent search for the time being. And here are some of the searches that I've conducted before. So conversation about compensation, satisfaction with current compensation, so on. So that was the search term that I entered, satisfaction with current compensation. And these were the two studies that I searched across. And then over here are my results. I can see Bryn said this, but I can also directly get into the transcript of what the researcher had asked and what Bryn said, and also play the video audio right next to it. So this is just a very initial step into a more of a longitudinal and more of a cross study kind of a experience. It starts with simple search, but we intend to do a lot more. Yeah.
Nice. So I can say I'm interested in this topic across these studies that are relevant, and it will pool supporting evidence in this format. What kinds of analysis or study types is Reveal best suited for?
So first part of it is conversational, that it is really built on a conversation engine. So that is an important element. You could take open ends from surveys and use it as conversational also. So it doesn't have to be just interviews and focus groups in that regard. The second thing that Reveal doesn't do right now is it cannot understand the tone of the voice, or it doesn't understand what's being presented on the screen. So if you were doing a usability study, it doesn't understand. As long as something is being talked about, it can capture that. But if something is on the screen, it won't be able to do that right now. So those are the kinds of study where Reveal might not be a good fit, but everything else, which is conversational, I've had people use it for very different use cases, like analyzing earnings calls on company reports. So anything that's conversational, Reveal can analyze that.
Okay. Related to that, if it's an unmoderated study,
Mhm.
and so this the transcript is the person reads the question, the person answers the question, would that trip up the conversational analysis because it's the same speaker?
In that case, the transcription service will get tripped. It
Okay.
won't be able to differentiate between the two. We are working on, so there is this whole effort we are doing on how can you manage your transcript the best. And part of it are things that we discussed before around being able to replace words And part of it is exactly this, that if it has misidentified a speaker, you would be able to correct that. So that's
So
further
there
down.
may be some manual workarounds, or if you got a transcript some other way and or fixed the transcript so that it said interviewer for the questions, then you could then upload that transcript to Reveal. That would be a way around that for the unmoderated study, it sounds like.
That is correct.
So if I weren't allowed, for example, to record, and I only had my notes from a particular participant,
Right.
they would need to at least be formatted in like question, answer, question, answer, question, answer format so that it felt a little more transcription-like. And then it would maybe that would be an approach to trying to use this conversation analysis approach, but it needs that question answer format.
That is correct. That is correct.
What should folks do if they want to try Reveal for themselves?
Sure. So there is a free trial that's already available on the website. So you should be able to go here, say, try it for free, and you can set up. It already includes 4 different interviews, which will allow you to do comparisons and everything. So you'll be able to see the full set of capabilities. Uh, yeah, so that's already available to the group.
Great. You mentioned a lot of things that are coming next. Is there anything that you want to highlight that you're particularly excited about?
Sure. So one of the things that we are very excited about is how we can layer in additional levels of more sophisticated analysis on top of what's already there. For example, if I want to build personas, traditionally that's very challenging to use qualitative data for and do it. But Reveal can handle 80 interviews kind of thing, right? So it can look across those and identify cohorts of people who think similar, who have expressed ideas in a similar manner, and it can identify those cohorts as personas. So that's one thing, for instance, that we are working on. And you can
Nice.
similarly apply that into journey maps, jobs to be done, other areas like that. So
Okay. So adding some more like framework analysis, things like that.
that's correct.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And with that, I just want to thank you so much, and we're going to end the recording.